All right, so welcome to our second color theory mixing focused video. If you're kind of jumping around videos, you'll definitely want to go back and watch the whole color mixing demo and lecture, the long one that precedes this video. I thought I'd come back and do a few more of the color matching exercises just to practice and to show you kind of what you'll be doing when you're doing the process and just things that you're thinking about. And again, just remember this is a good time to really pay attention to what's happening and ask questions why things are changing the way they're changing as you're mixing, and experiment. You're gonna have some colors that go way off in the wrong direction, which I might, and you can try to save them. It should be a fun game, I think. So again, I'm using magazine clippings, just basically from art magazines. Cut out a little square of a color that I try to go for. These, I think, from what I saw last night when we did this color, they're not the greatest just because the paper kind of gets wet and gets a dark ring around it, and there's quite a bit of glare. I adjusted the camera better this time, so hopefully you can see the color that I'm actually trying to match. But the color swatches, from Home Depot or hardware store are going to work a little bit better because of they're more of a cardboard and they're slightly more laminated, so they're easier to kind of dab on and wipe off. Also, photographs or your iPad screen are great to kind of dab on and test a color or a value as you're going. Those are great exercises. If you do decide for, again, the color assignment that I'll be posting online for you is optional. You don't have to do it. But if you want to, definitely recommend it. And one thing that you can do for that is if you are choosing to practice matching colors for one of the assignments that you'll be turning in with your final portfolio, you can match colors in one of your photos to just practice before you start painting on it, to understand the color relationships that are happening in it. When you're doing that though, and let's say you're going for a particular, there's like a green bush or some green grass that you're trying to get that actual green that's right, in the front foreground. But as you're doing it, you miss and you're off in a different kind of version of a green. I usually look around my photo to see if that green would work somewhere else, and then I make a little note of that. Like I said, with my Sharpie on my glass palette's always good. Take a picture with my iPhone and have a little file going for that particular reference. It's a good method, and or just make a mental note. I tend to forget how I get to things often. Like, I don't even remember exactly what we were playing with when we got this. That being said too, when you're mixing these colors, and I'll try to do a couple of them, you can get to a color a couple different ways, and so it's fun, and sometimes not. Sometimes it's really a very particular route, but it is fun to kind of be like, okay, I did it with the alizarin crimson this time. Now for the red, maybe I'll do the burnt sienna as more of the warmer red. That'll be my most red in the mixture, and see how you get to it that way as opposed to this way. And I still have the same paints out from last night. But I'm going to avoid the tests of the expanded palette and just focus on our limited color palette with the alizarin crimson, cad yellow light, ultramarine, white, ivory, burnt sienna, and that's it. And then the secondary and the intermediary colors. I tend to mostly stick with more of the primaries, and the secondaries not as much as the intermediary colors when I'm mixing. Like, I don't usually have these out, but they work great. So however you want to, you can set this up and work this way, or just have the primary and the secondary. You definitely want to have a secondary mix, because that's what you're gonna use as your complementary. So you want to have the green, the orange, and the purple ready to go, so that you can start neutralizing your primaries with your secondary and vice versa. That's a good habit to get into, especially when working with limited color palettes. So, because you can't just grab the tube of purple and squirt it out when you need to neutralize your yellow. So, okay, so let's jump in on this one here. So just a quick reminder, this is the basic process, and I vary it a little bit, but when I kind of step back and think about what I do when I'm mixing a color is I usually try to determine what its local color or hue is. So is it red, yellow, blue, green, orange, or violet? And I'll tend to usually kind of stick with the primary. Is it more red, more yellow, or more blue? And once I have that, I'll kind of get that color on my palette. And then from there, I'll look at the color and ask myself, what's its saturation level? Is it more saturated? If so, then I will kind of leave it as is and not put too much of a complementary in to neutralize it, or to mute it, and we'll then start kind of working on the value. If it is more saturated, then I'll put my complementary color in and kind of start desaturating, making it more muted or grayed, to roughly what I'm seeing. After I've kind of got the color in its rough saturation level, then I'll go ahead and lighten it and or darken it and get the value dialed in a little bit more closely. And once I start getting that value dialed in, as it's getting closer, and in particular with lighter colors, this is a very, the colors that I've chosen for the most part are going to be on the lighter spectrum and more neutral. I chose some neutral ones just to kind of show you some of the nuance that you can get when you play back and forth with that, as opposed to maybe a more direct color that's a little bit easier to get to. So definitely challenge yourself. But what I was saying though is with the lighter colors in particular, when you start to push it into the light, remember white's our coolest color on the palette, so the temperature is going to keep getting cooler, and this is a warmer light color. So I always want to, towards the end in particular, that's when I start really trying to get the temperature correct, making sure that it's not too cool or too warm. And in doing so, you also have to kind of keep that value in check too. Those little subtle shifts happen around that time. So that's kind of my basic process. If I'm off, so let's say I make a mark next to it or on it and it's not correct, I just ask myself, does the mark that I made need more red, more blue, or more yellow? That's a good starting spot, is to say which primary direction does it need to go. And then from there, if you're in the right direction there, or you need to make that choice after, and it shifted a little bit, then you want to kind of start over the list again. Be like, okay, now it got a little too saturated, so now I need to desaturate. Now it got a little too dark, now I need to lighten it. Now it's a little too cool, so now I'm going to warm it, and then test it again. So that's the basic process. And it varies, like if I have a lighter color, this isn't super light, but sometimes if it's super light, I'll start with the white first and get the value. So I get the white and put a little bit of red into it, just to kind of jumpstart it, as opposed to getting a big puddle of red going and then have to dump a ton of white into it to get it to the right value. But for the most part, that's kind of the basic step process. So let's do this one. So in general, I would say, this is an orangish color, but I'd say, if I had to be, what color would I start with? It's definitely a red. I guess I could start with a yellow if I wanted to. I don't remember, like I said, I don't remember what I started with last time. I feel like you just kind of, it feels more intuitive, but that'd be an interesting thing to do, is to start with a little yellow, or to start with the burnt sienna, or to start with a red for that. Maybe we can try that. So let's just start with a red. And I did exactly what I said that I didn't want to do, which was to start with a big puddle of red, but we're gonna go for it. Hopefully it makes it easier to see. All right, so I need to go quite a bit lighter, and I know I need to add some other colors into it. So sometimes if I know I'm going to be adding some other colors, like I'm definitely going to add yellow to make it into the more orange. I'm going to then need to neutralize it by adding some blue, because complementary color of orange is blue, and blue is a darker intrinsic darker local value. So I know it'll get darker when I add that blue. So I know I can even overshoot. Now see, now this is, I hate when I do this. That's another reason why I don't like to do a big chunk. So if you start getting a big, right off the bat, a big mixture, or let's say you're mixing for a long time and you start to like have a big pile going, I just start a new smaller one so I'm not wasting a bunch of paint. And I might even just take a second and scrape this off. Whoops. And move it off to the side. I'm not going to get rid of it because I can dip back into it if I need to push it back into the pinky red side. And yes, pinky red is a technical term. Joking. All right, so we got a fairly light valued red. I'm going to take a little bit of yellow and push it into the orange. I'm not going to overdo it. I think that looks pretty good right now. If your paint's, this paint is sitting out overnight, so it's a little dry, so I'm just going to dip a little bit of, get a little terpenoid in it to kind of loosen it up so it's easier to mix. Okay, so now we've got more of a pink, but you can see that it's, or more of an orange, but you can see it's very highly saturated. So this is on the orange side, so complementary color, like I said, is going to be the blue. So I'm just going to take a little bit of blue. So I'm barely dabbing it in. I'm going to slowly push it in there. And I'm going to lighten it again. It's feeling fairly cool because of the white. And I'm going to push it even a little bit lighter. And so because it's getting cooler, I can either add a little more red to it, or I can add a little more yellow. And when I look there, it feels like it's got a little more yellow going on. So I'm going to add more yellow. I was going to say I'm going to add more red, but then I twisted my brush around and a chunk of red fell out in it, which is excellent timing on the red's part. So you can hold it right on top of it to kind of see how you're doing, or dab on it. I might just dab in the corner a little bit. Cool, so when I look at that color right there, it feels a little too saturated. It also feels like this is more blue happening in it. It feels more neutral, right? Or it just feels more blue and it feels too saturated. And so we're fortunate that this is an orange, and by adding blue, we'll neutralize it and also make it bluer. So we kill two birds with one stone in this case. No need for extra dipping. And it might have gone a little bit too dark, but that is a touch lighter than it needed to be. That's feeling, it's hard to tell because there's a lot of pink on that. I'm just going to get that dark ring around it. But I think that's pretty dang close. So I think I'm going to add a little bit more blue to neutralize it. Still a little bit too saturated. looking pretty dang close. It might be a teeny bit more white. Get a little bit of terp on there. I think that's it. And it'll look a little darker on the brush because of the shadows between the so it's a teeny bit, well, it's hard to tell where the light is, but that's pretty dang close. Depending on what angle I'm standing at, it looks darker or lighter. It's hard to tell, but I think that's it. So, that was one way. Sorry, I'm just adjusting the value a little bit, see if you guys can see it. But yeah, it looks a teeny bit darker. So when I look at that, it's like, it could be a little bit, teeny bit lighter. But we're also dealing with 2 different materials. So that could also be playing and how the light is reflecting off of it. This has got more of a matte. This is obviously more glossy with the oil. See, and that was just a teeny bit more white, but you can see that kind of, I don't know. Yeah, overshot a little bit into the too white, but that's pretty dang close right in there, right between those two. So if I were to really want to dial it in more, I would probably add just a teeny bit more yellow to warm it back up, and maybe a little bit of blue. But that's pretty accurate mixing there. So hopefully you guys can see that on the screen okay. But you can see it, that feels a teeny bit cooler. It's hard because the gray is breaking through too from underneath the palette. I just got more red in it. All right, so I'll stop messing with that one. That got red from the brush in it. That one's pretty close though. You can see how this feels a little bit. So if I added just a little bit of yellow and a little bit of blue, you see how this one feels a little more saturated than this one. This one feels a little more neutral. So by adding a little bit of yellow and a little bit of blue, we would be essentially adding a little bit of green, which kind of looks like what's going on there, to kind of take it down a notch and warm it up a little bit at the same time. This one's still a little bit too cool. All right, so that was one way. So maybe what we can do is, let's see if we can get to it with a burnt sienna and a yellow start. Because that would make, burnt sienna is essentially an orange, right? But it's got some blue hue going on with it. So let's see what happens if we mix a little burnt sienna and yellow and white. See where that takes us. Ooh, look, it jumped pretty quick to where we might want it to be. Nice. Loosen it up a little. Oh. Now let's add a little blue to neutralize the orange. We could actually, so let's do it the other way. Let's do, instead of the blue-orange route, let's go the purple route. Because, relatively speaking, we could also say that that's a yellow instead of an orange, right? Especially compared to that, and definitely compared to this, which is a red. That starts to feel a little more yellow-orange or orange, but next to this, that feels a little more yellow. So to neutralize yellow, we would use purple. And I'll just try to use this kind of more in the middle purple secondary as opposed to the primary. No, I'm going to go with the more red purple because I think that blue is going to take it a little too fast. I think I just put too much on. Because when I look up there, that feels a little more purple than blue. But essentially that right there is just adding red and blue, which you can do too, but you can also just throw in the other one and see what happens. Lighten it up. All right. I don't know, I felt like that was a little faster. Getting there. I got a little too cool, so I'll add just a teeny bit of the burnt sienna. Because the burnt sienna will have an orange or yellow in it, right? I don't want to overshoot quite yet. Still feeling too cool though, so I do want to, that'll keep darkening. The burnt sienna will keep darkening, so I'm going to jump over to my yellow. Push it warmer a little faster without getting much darker. That's looking pretty good. So yeah, it looks a little neutral though, right? So that'd be one thing that I think that maybe this burnt sienna is going to have a hard time doing, especially after adding the purple to it, is keeping that saturation level, where the alizarin crimson is easy to bump that back up pretty quick. So I'm going to go a little lighter again. And let's take a look at how we're doing. I think it's still too dark. Still a little too neutral. Well, yeah, a little dark, a little neutral, but getting close. And at this stage, you know, I try to keep it to 3, but you know, maybe giving a little bump of your alizarin crimson could take it that last little distance. When I look there, it feels just a little bit lighter. And again, just a teeny bit of yellow. Well, hopefully you guys can see this okay on the screen. At this stage, I can't seem to get that pink back up. It's kind of just hovering in the orange. So I'm going to push its red. Too much. Here we go. Needed that little nudge. Cool. So we're looking pretty good. Maybe can go a teeny bit lighter, and mine's a little warmer. So when I add the white to it, it should get us on spot. So, but that's the basic game, and you can, you know, put them next to each other. Yeah. So this one's a little, still a little too dark. If that one was the accurate one, and this one's a little more orange, that one's a little more pink. I think this one seems to be more accurate in the characteristics of this color here. So that's kind of a fun way of working it. So try 2 different directions. So let's try another color here. I feel like maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll only do a couple here. So I can start pushing some other demos along for you guys further. All right, so let's do this. Weird one. I don't remember picking this one, but I like it. So let's see. I would say that this one is going to be, you know, more of a, if we were to be like pick its one of the secondaries, or most closest to, I'd say it's more of a green, green color. And I'm gonna push it up a little higher on the screen there. It's a green, right? But if you wanted to go with the primary, you could start with the yellow. So those are two different starting points that you could do. But I think I'm gonna start with the green. And I think I'm gonna grab from, let's start with this here. Just a straight, more middle of the road green, relatively speaking. And throw a little white in, start pushing my value more so I can see what temperature this green is a little bit better. It's got quite a bit of yellow in it. And then now I want to neutralize it. But I don't know if I want to go directly with the alizarin crimson. Maybe want to use that burnt sienna. So let's, and maybe we can do a second round on this one too, and try a different route. Whoa, it's fairly heavy-handed. It's okay. Throw a little more green in. Now just push it back. Cool, so mine's still fairly saturated in the green, yellow. I'm gonna do a little more burnt sienna. And then now it's feeling fairly warm, but if I throw some more white in there, it's gonna cool off real quick. Getting closer. Still too green. I'm gonna push more burnt sienna. I don't know, maybe that alizarin crimson route would have been a little better to get more neutral faster. So that's starting to get a little onto the orange side, but I'm gonna cool it off and see what happens because it's still really warm. Let's do a little test. Yeah, so hard to say because of the glare here, but this can go just a little bit darker. And I think it get a little cooler, so instead of dipping into this green, which has the yellow in it, I might just grab a little bit more of the blue green, see what happens, or I could just do some straight blue. And what's nice about that blue is that it will darken it, and it will neutralize some of the orange that's in this burnt sienna as well. Just like the green was, but just a little more heavy-handed. And we might have, I think it's a gradated, yeah, maybe a teeny bit lighter. I keep saying that teeny bit lighter, so it's making me think that there's some kind of a glare thing here. We're looking pretty close there. Let's do a little bit of white, a teeny bit of, I really want to use a little orange, red orange, kind of kill some of the green, warm it up. guys can see that very well. But yeah, still just a little bit lighter, and then probably a little bit of yellow. So lighten it. Now before we add the yellow, let's just test it. Yeah, I think the paper's just getting wet, making it look darker every time. So that's pretty dang close. And when I squint, this one actually feels lighter. That's an interesting way of checking it. So you can see, I think that one before that we had was more accurate. So there's an old chunk of it before I lightened it. You can see that those are pretty dang close. So, so that'd be taking the burnt sienna yellow route. And you know, the other way we would do it would be to do, so we'll leave, don't worry about wasting paint. If you get too stingy and your palette color's breaking through all the time and it's just a thin smudge with a bunch of terp in it, it'll be frustrating. So you can see I kind of spend quite a bit of time getting it thick and kind of goopy and then flattening it out and mixing it well. So let's do the yellow. Instead of starting green, we'll start with yellow. And throw a little white in there. And a little alizarin crimson to get us a nice orange going. I could have started over there with an orange, but let's do it this way. Let's kill that orange, some blue, complementary color. So that's getting more blue, more yellow. And I could have used a green too. I'm just intentionally trying to work my way around in a different way. So when I look at this, I know it's not there yet, but let's just see what it is at. So when I look at that one that I just made there, mine is too red. So it needs to go more into the green side, and mine's too saturated. So this is too orange. It needs to go more into the green, and it needs to be more saturated. Or less saturated. So if this is orange, I'm going to take the blue route first, kind of put a little blue in it to kill the orange, which will also kill the saturation. And I need to lighten it as well, so that's going to also cool it with some white. A little terp, loosen it up. So this is still too red, so let's do a little I need a little yellow and a little blue. And again a little white. Getting better. blue. There we go. I think we're getting closer. Yeah, so this one's still a little warm and a little bit dark, so maybe even just a teeny bit more white. But again, that's what I've been saying all along on each mark. So I think you can see that's getting close. Little blue, so close. And you might just need at this point teeny bump into the red. There we go. Cool. Looking pretty good. So that would be taking a different route. Essentially it's kind of all the same route in a weird way, but we had no burnt sienna at play in that one. We still had the purple by doing the red and the blue separately, as opposed to the mixture, but we're controlling it differently. All right, so and let's do one more, and maybe this one we'll just do one time round here. So that was a red, a yellow. Here is a blue. It's a fairly neutral blue, right? It has like a yellowish thing going on. It's got a little bit of a purple vibe. Sorry, I keep trying to get the shot good for you. All right, so let's just start with blue, and I'll throw a little white in right off the bat. See how blue has such a nice purple thing going on, but sometimes has a little greenish look. Let's see here. So I might just jump over to the burnt sienna because it's got a little yellow in it. So that's gonna, it'll neutralize it because it's a complementary color, right? But the yellow will kind of help get it a little warmer. And I think I went a little too heavy on that, so I'll put more blue back in. I got a little too into the burnt sienna side of things, a little bit too orange. Now we're starting to get back into the blue zone. Let's go ahead and lighten it so we can see where we are temperature-wise and hue. So now, when you look at mine, you can see that mine's too cool, and it still feels blue, but barely hanging in there. And this one has a little bit more warmth to it, so I'm going to add a little yellow. The burnt sienna, I think, would take it too much to the purple. This one feels more purple, and this one feels more green, relatively speaking. So I add yellow to push it towards the direction that is. And if it gets too yellow, then I just add a little burnt sienna and a little we could have also gone the ultramarine way, the alizarin crimson way instead of the burnt sienna. Maybe I did and I just forgot. As I was mixing here, I think it's getting closer into the range that is, just not the right value. There we go, coming along. All right. Now this one's feeling a little bluer. Yeah, so this one's got more red look to it. So we're gonna lighten it first though. Make sure it's not a temperature issue. And probably add a little bit of blue back in there. It might have been better to start now that I'm mixing this. You see how that this has like a purple thing going on, and this is definitely more of a purple red as opposed to the burnt sienna. So painting on thicker. Yeah, so this still feels too orange, so it needs more white and more blue. There, that's starting to feel better. Teeny bit more white. Yeah, something's going on with the paper because it's getting darker as it sits there longer. But I think pretty dang close. So yeah, we even do that test. Whoa. So we went way past. So I think that one back there was going to be more accurate. So let's actually just, for the sake of accuracy, let's go ahead and get it back. Blew past it again. And I'm getting a mess. There, starting to get back to where we needed to be, but just a little darker. But let's see how much darker. Yeah, so it's darker and warmer, so white's gonna cool it and lighten it. Hopefully I didn't just manhandle it again. Getting closer. So this has a little more green in it, a little more yellow, right? So it looks a little greener. So it looks green, add a little red. I'm really tempted to grab from that pile there. Wipe off some of my excess that keeps getting in there. Anyway, we're really close. Little burnt sienna. And a little blue. A little more gently on the white this time. Learn my lesson. Yep, there we go. So, it's looking pretty good. A little shadow, but still a touch lighter. Anyway, you get the idea. Yeah. So, so that'd be this one. You know, I think I'll probably call it good there. just because I think you guys are getting the gist. And the other one that I have chosen is just a more purple version of that blue. It's like a gray purple, warm grayed out purple. And I think we'll probably get to it pretty quick. So, so that would be just examples of color mixing to try to match something, and hopefully that was helpful for you. But definitely have fun with it, enjoy the process, make notes, and if you find a cool color that you like, let me know. Hope everybody's doing well, and hopefully this is fun for you. So take care, have a good rest of your day or night, whatever you got going on when you watch this, and I'll talk to you soon.